just correct you on one point. I agree with everything you said, except when you said they don't ask us for anything. They did ask. President Putin asked to join NATO in 2000. He asked President George W. Bush to join NATO. They want a war with Russia, and the people pushing this believe that somehow they own Russia, maybe because their ancestors lived there or something. I don't understand the psychology, but they think they have a right to control what happens in Russia, how it's governed, and they would like to break up Russia. What makes me emotional is how pointless this is. There is no critical American interest that is served by having a war with Russia. And in fact, all of our critical interests are threatened by that. It is deranged. We did not need to do this. Most has been completely hijacked by people who are using the United States for their own purposes, who have no real interest in the United States and its future, who aren't tied to its past. It's the consensus at the top. It's the collusion against the American people by the leadership of both parties, against the interests of the majority of both parties. That is the true crime here. And you'll notice, by the way, Trump leads us into this.
Look, I need you to watch what happens in this conversation. Tucker Carlson and Rick Sanchez are sitting in Moscow, and I don't care what you think about either of them. What they're about to say out loud is something that gets you basically blacklisted from American media. They're going to talk about Putin asking to join NATO in 2000. Think about that for a second. Russia literally asked to be part of the defensive alliance designed to contain Russia, and we said no. Because the war machine needed an enemy. The donor class needed a threat. The weapons manufacturers needed a customer. And then watch how they both arrive at the same conclusion, that the culture war stuff, the trans panic, all of it is a deliberate distraction from the fact that both parties are completely captured by the same interests. They're going to say it out loud in Moscow. Because apparently you have to leave the country to tell the truth about it. Let's get into it.
I thought when I got here, people would say, you're an American and we can't stand you for what you're doing to us and for attacking us and for whatever else they may perceive that we were doing, which may have been an injustice. It's just the opposite. They love America. They love they love our culture. When you walk into you were here. When you walk into a mall in Russia, you see American names, American slogans, American ideas. You hear American songs that they're playing in the background. And yet, it seems funny because they've never asked us for anything. We don't send money to Russia, but we send it to all these other countries. It almost seems peculiar that we would treat people who are not meaning any harm to us that way. I don't get it. How would you explain that?
Well, I would just correct you on one point. I agree with everything you said, except when you said they don't ask us for anything. They did ask. President Putin asked to join NATO in 2000. He asked President George W. Bush to join NATO, the defensive alliance designed to keep Russia under control. Russia asked to join it, at which point you say to yourself, okay, we're done here. We've succeeded. The people we thought were enemies are now our friends. Like, why wouldn't you want Russia in NATO? That's like the number one thing you would want. That's the whole point of NATO, is to get Russia to behave like the West. Well, okay, now they're asking to be part of it. And we turned them down. George W. Bush turned them down apparently under the spell of Condoleezza Rice, his national security advisor. And it's like, at that point, that's the most revealing fact of the last 30 years, in my opinion. We want a war with Russia, and the people pushing this believe that somehow they own Russia, maybe because their ancestors lived there or something. I don't understand the psychology, but they think they have a right to control what happens in Russia, how it's governed, and they would like to break up Russia. And they clearly would like the resources of Russia. I mean, they've said this. So if you're Russian, for the Russian perspective, this is not a joke. It's not about some oblasts in eastern Ukraine. It's about your survival as a nation. So I guess what I'm saying is, as an American, I am very concerned that we are pushing Russia toward a third world war. And I think that we are. And I think it's a lot closer than most Americans understand. No one's paying any attention at all in the United States, just so you know, in case you haven't been here recently. They're thinking about their lives. They're thinking about, to the extent they think about the rest of the world, they're thinking about Iran. They are not thinking about what's happening in Eastern Europe. And my view, as someone who's talking to a bunch of people, is that we are closer than we've ever been to a global conflict over this war with Russia. And the reason is really simple. The United States is waging a war against Russia. Most Americans don't know that. And if that continues, I'm very concerned that this could get completely out of control and kill a lot of people and destroy the United States. So I'm not for that. Why would I be for that? I'm not.
Russia's very imperfect, just like you are and I am and every country in the world is in many ways, of course, right? But generally speaking, the things that I have always been taught were very American from the standpoint of our culture and, as you say, our morals. I find here, they're building more churches here than we're building in the United States. They are relying more on their Christian faith, more than I've seen in most places. Suzanne and I this weekend went up to Uglich, and we saw the sense of community built around the church and what the priests there were talking about. And I was saying, wow, this is something that we don't see so much in the United States. Russians, I find, are looking for ways to improve their lives. They're looking to build businesses. They're encouraged to build families. And the more they build their families, the more the government gives them. There's a health care plan. They get maternity leave. They get overtime pay required by, the government. We don't have these things in the United States. So those things are important, aren't they?
Well, of course they are. And the Russian government is also, I should just add, banned witchcraft and GMO. So I also support that. But it's not even and I agree strongly with what you're saying. I think Russia's a beautiful country. It's an amazing country. My favorite country I've ever visited. I've been a couple of times. I hope to come more.
Yeah.
But that's not why I'm so agitated or why my voice is.
Okay, so pause for a second, because this is the part where it gets wild. Tucker just said, and Rick immediately backed him up, that the United States government is being worn as a skin suit by people who have no actual interest in America's future. And dude, he's not wrong. I know you guys don't need me to explain that to you, but the fact that he's saying this in Russia because he can't say it on American television without losing every single advertiser, that should tell you everything. Here's what genuinely drives me insane about this. Putin asked to join NATO in 2000. George W. Bush said no. Condoleezza Rice, who, by the way, has made an entire career out of war hawk consulting gigs and think tank positions funded by defense contractors, convinced him to reject it. You understand what that means, right? It means the war was always the point. Russia trying to integrate with the West, trying to be part of the so-called international order, that would have been the end of the threat. And the threat is the product. The threat is what justifies the trillion-dollar military budgets. The threat is what keeps Raytheon and Lockheed Martin stock prices climbing while your wages stay flat for 40 years. They needed Russia to be the enemy. And when Russia said, okay, we'll join you, the answer was no, because there's no profit in peace. There's no donor money in diplomacy. There's no revolving door consultancy in cooperation. And Tucker's absolutely right when he says most Americans have no idea we're this close to a world war. Because the media, corporate media, all of it, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, doesn't matter. They're not covering it honestly because they're all owned by the same people who benefit from the war. You think Comcast wants to tell you that we're escalating toward nuclear conflict over some border dispute that has nothing to do with American security? No. They want you mad about bathrooms. They want you mad about pronouns. They want you fighting with your neighbor about culture war nonsense while Lockheed Martin gets another $80 billion contract and your kid can't afford to see a doctor. It's so obvious. It's very, very obvious. And the fact that Tucker and Rick both see it, guys who spent their entire careers in mainstream media, and they're saying it now because they're literally outside the system, that tells you how captured the whole thing is. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about that, because this is genuinely one of the most mask-off conversations I've seen in a long time.
Or why my voice is rising or why I suddenly feel so emotional. What makes me emotional is how pointless this is. There is no critical American interest that is served by having a war with Russia. And in fact, all of our critical interests are threatened by that. It is deranged. We did not need to do this. Most Americans don't want this. They definitely don't want to live with the consequences of continuing to do it, which are profound. And the only reason we're doing this is because our leadership class, which is illegitimate and demonstrably terrible at their jobs, wants it for whatever sick, weird reason. And, you know, who knows what those reasons are, but they are totally determined to do this against the will of the American people and against the interests of America. And so it drives me crazy because this does not need to happen at all.
This is the thing I've always gotten from you. And one of the reasons I've really come to, and I don't mean to sound schlocky or anything, but I've really come to respect you as a colleague and as a friend, is your message is always consistent, and it's this: we need to get back to taking care of the interests of the American people, because with each passing year, we're getting away from that. That's what I hear you say over and over again. And we see it in Iran. We see it in our relationship with Israel. We see it with what's going on in Ukraine and in other places as well. How do we get there, and why did we lose that perspective?
Well, because I think, and I didn't used to think this, but I have been led to this conclusion by the things that I have seen up close, not just read about, but watched personally. I think that the United States government, which is the largest human institution in history, has more people and more funding than any human institution ever, has been completely hijacked by people who are using the United States for their own purposes, who have no real interest in the United States and its future, who aren't tied to its past, and who are basically just wearing it as a skin suit in order to, who knows what, lots of things, but none of them in the interest of the United States. I really think it's a very simple question of a bad leadership class. Like, we don't have good leaders. And we know this from living in families. When you have a strong father who loves his children, in general, you have a thriving family. I mean, things can happen, of course. Yeah. But most of the time, the love of a strong father is enough to create a happy, thriving family. And that is true with countries as well. And we don't have that. And I wish we did. I pray that we will, but we don't. And that is really kind of the whole story right there.
Well, that's because it seems to me that every 4 years, half of the country decides that one party is good and the other guy's bad. Like right now, it's going to be Trump is bad. Before it was Biden is bad, Obama. But you're not getting anything different no matter who ends up in office. So maybe there's something wrong with the process, right?
Well, I agree with that. And you're encouraged, and this is poisonous, and I've played a big role in it over the years, and I'm ashamed of that.
Me too.
But you're encouraged to hate your fellow Americans. Yeah. And you're encouraged. I mean, someone said to me the other day, like, what are you talking about a third party? You're going to get AOC elected. And I'm like, I don't want Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's clearly unqualified and silly. And like, I'm not for her, of course. And she doesn't like whites. And I'm, obviously against that. But what you're trying to do here is what you always try and do, and what I have played a role in doing, which is convincing people that my side might not be great, but the other side is evil. And that's just a lie. The truth is, it's not the differences between us that are the problem. It's the consensus at the top. It's the collusion against the American people by the leadership of both parties, against the interests of the majority of both parties. That is the true crime here. And you'll notice, by the way, Trump leads us into this war in Iran. The public doesn't want it at all.
Of course not.
And guess who doesn't protest it? The leadership of the Democratic Party. Why? Because they're for it too. So that just kind of tells you everything. That, for me, was the most radicalizing thing I've seen in 35 years of covering American politics. Chuck Schumer was not mad about the war, the regime change war with Iran, because he's in favor of it. Yeah. He and the Republican leadership are on the same page on the biggest question of my lifetime. Right.
So they'll criticize Trump about trans issues, but they won't criticize him about this.
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly. No, that is literally true. Yeah, let's fight about transgenderism. Well, obviously, transgenderism is sad and absurd and an offense against nature and a middle finger to Christianity and God. I get all that. Yeah, but I believe that. I'll always know that that's true. Is that the pivotal question in America, on the planet? No, of course not. It's a sideshow created to distract you from what's actually happening, which is a total takeover of the United States by people who don't care about the United
All right, so here's the thing. Tucker Carlson and Rick Sanchez just sat in Moscow and said out loud what every single person paying attention already knows. The culture war is a distraction. Both parties serve the same donor class, and the American people are being played like an absolute fiddle. And they're right. Like, they're just correct. Russia asked to join NATO, and we said no because we needed the enemy. We needed the threat. The weapons manufacturers, the think tanks, the consulting firms, the entire national security state, it all runs on threat inflation. It all runs on keeping you scared of someone else so you don't notice who's actually robbing you. Tucker nailed it when he said the leadership of both parties is on the same page on war. Chuck Schumer didn't protest Trump's Iran escalation because he agreed with it. Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi both voted for every single massive military spending bill while telling you we can't afford healthcare. They fight about trans issues on cable news and then go have drinks together after they vote to send another $100 billion to the defense budget. That's the con. That's the whole game. And the fact that you had to watch two guys in Russia explain it to you because American media won't, that should radicalize you. That should make you furious. I don't care if you like Tucker or not. I don't care if you think Rick Sanchez is cringe or whatever. What matters is they just told you the truth about how your government actually works, and they had to leave the country to do it. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Every single time someone tries to get you mad about some culture war issue, ask yourself who benefits from you being distracted. Every single time a politician beats the drum for war, ask yourself who's funding their campaign. Every single time the media tells you Russia or China or Iran is the biggest threat to your life, ask yourself if that's actually true or if Raytheon just needs another quarterly earnings beat. Because the real threat, it's not in Moscow, it's not in Beijing. It's in the boardrooms of Lockheed Martin and the donor networks funding both parties, and the revolving door between the Pentagon and the weapons industry. That's what Tucker and Rick just showed you. And that's what we talk about here at Blueprint. If this made you think, hit that like button, share this with someone who still believes the two-party system is real, and drop a comment telling me what you thought about this conversation. Do you think it's possible to have this discussion on American television? Or do you have to literally go to Russia to tell the truth about American empire? Stay sharp. I'll see you in the next one.